Hey, welcome back to Transform Your Workplace. I am Brandon Laws, and today I'm joined by my colleague Lacey Partipilo. She's the VP of Client Success here at Xenium HR. Lacey and I go way back on the show. In fact, she was guest number one, dating back to late 2012. And today we're digging into something every leader deals with: what to do when your people are struggling. How do you figure out what's actually getting in their way? When do you coach? When do you step in? And when do you need to get out of the way entirely? Lacey brings real experience to this one, and I loved her insights. All right, let's get into the conversation. Here's my conversation with Lacey Partipilo. Lacey, it is so good to have you back. You are the person that I first started this show with, and it's always good to have you back. Thanks
So
for
fun to be here. We always say make more time for these.
We definitely do.
Yeah.
We get busy. We're doing other stuff. We have other jobs besides, just coming on and talking on the podcast, but it is always fun to riff with you. And today I want to talk about a topic that I think is really important. In leadership, I always felt like one of the biggest jobs as a leader is to help reduce friction for your people so that they can become the best version of themselves. And I think one of the biggest things as a leader is to recognize when your people are struggling and to determine what that struggle is coming from. So when you recognize that in your people or other people that you just see as struggling or something's going on, how do you first uncover the obstacle that might be getting in their way?
I mean, I think you have to have regular time with your people. Like that's the most important thing. So if you are not meeting regularly with your employees and you don't have a good pulse on their workload, the challenges that come up inside of their job, the peaks and valleys that happen, right? Like we all have jobs that they ebb and flow. So if you don't feel like you could articulate those things, I would say you're not connected enough with your people. So I do think managers and employees should have that flow of information. So that's generally where I'm uncovering it. That's where I find our clients that are, have good manager-employee relationships are finding these things come up. It's inside of whether it's one-on-one meetings, team meetings, huddles where you talk about, where we're at. People use, different types of project management, agile, like all that stuff. There are ways to connect with employees to understand what's on their plate and what's getting in the way of them being successful. And I think how you have that conversation matters. I know we're going to probably talk a little bit about that today, but at a minimum, you got to be talking in order to get this help.
I agree. And I think like when you're observing somebody struggling, I think there's a couple of distinctions between like somebody who might be struggling and is stuck. I think those are two different things. But how do you uncover that? So if like they're stuck, maybe there's something preventing them from accomplishing whatever they're out to accomplish, versus that's an external factor perhaps. Or if they're struggling, maybe they're getting in their own way, or maybe they're emotionally they're going through something that's preventing them from performing at the rate. How do you uncover that? And it's probably, I know what you're gonna say, it's through probably question asking, but how do you personally uncover that?
I mean, for myself, I find that if you are asking those open-ended questions like you just mentioned, that's the basis of it. Just caring about people and really taking a genuine interest in what's happening on their desk goes a long way. So when I'm meeting with an employee and let's say we're going to have a performance conversation, or I want to know where something is at because I feel like we should be further along in the process than maybe we are, I try to go into it with an open mind. And sometimes that's hard because we as leaders, we sometimes think we have all the answers. Maybe we've done that job before. And so we're bringing our own backpack full of feelings and thoughts to the conversation. You have to take the backpack off and really try to understand from the perspective of that individual what's going on. I think otherwise we miss the opportunity to one, build trust and have that connection, but also to get at the root of what's happening. So just sitting down and really trying to dig in and ask those questions about what have you tried, what's working well when you've been stuck like this before, what's helped you get out of that. I think that goes a long way. I had an employee once tell me, and I think this is just my nature, like there's a problem that gets presented and oftentimes I get looped in. And I had an employee tell me one time, sometimes I want to come to you and we're going to talk about an issue. And sometimes I want you to help me solve that problem. And there's a technique to that, right? Sometimes I need you to actually go solve it for me because I have exhausted all my effort and I'm feeling over my skis in terms of my ability to resolve it. And sometimes I just want to vent. And that is a very different type of conversation, requires a different type of listening. And so when we're in these conversations, I think that's a helpful lens to be listening from. And sometimes you don't know until you get into it what the appropriate approach is. But I have carried that with me. It was good feedback that I got when I was a newer manager in my career in terms of like, you don't have to be a hero and save the day. That might not be what's necessary.
I find that whoever that was, that's a very self-aware way to start a meeting or conversation. And hopefully now you've taken that and like almost like set ground rules when you're going into a situation like that. It's like, I want to help you in the best way possible, but like, is this a venting situation? Is it, I need to help you fix it or I fix it for you? Or do you want me to just listen and help you get to fixing it yourself? Like, do you start meetings like that?
Yeah, it was actually Kelly Woodworth, one of our HR business partners here when I first started managing her. And she was in a very first one-on-one that she was like, listen, we've worked together for a long time. I know how you operate. I want to set some ground rules so that we can have a successful relationship. It was great. And I've used it. I've shared it with newer leaders. I have used it with every direct report I have had since then in the last 7 or 8 years, just to help center my listening. And there's a trap, right? Like I want to fix things. I want us to move through work quickly and take care of our clients. So I think if I have a tendency, I fall towards the like, not just sitting in a venting space, but like really trying to figure out what we can do to get through that. Yeah. Sometimes people can solve the problems on their own. In fact, I think that happens a fair amount if you're good at asking questions, if you're good at helping people think through what they've tried and what they haven't tried and have they exhausted all of their resources. I think resource allocation can be sometimes a challenge, especially we work with a lot of small businesses. So sometimes the problem feels unsolvable because you're short on resources. So you as a leader sometimes have to navigate that because you might not be able to add resource or budget.
One of the things that has come up for me in terms of just helping people solve their own problems is like when they come into you and ask you something, a really good like redirection is like, what do you think? You know what I mean? Because then they have to like, it's like, oh, you just flip the question back on me and now I've got to answer the question. And then I guess at that point you could then, if it's an unsolvable thing, then you can probably step in at that point. It's like, I don't know, I've exhausted every resource. I'm seeking your help. Yeah. So that then you'll know that like, okay, they've actually tried and they just either, whether it's a resource issue or a competency thing, then you know, okay, now it's time to step in and actually do some coaching and help them get through this.
Yeah, I like that. And I like actually like talking through what resources and efforts have been exhausted because I have found sometimes you find breaks within your organization or your processes where they might say, well, I went to this person over here and here's what I was met with. And you as the leader know, actually, we should have been able to resolve if we went that path. Let's figure out maybe there's a deeper issue over here that we need to look at. And if you're not asking them to walk you through their thinking and what they've already tried to accomplish, I think you miss that opportunity.
Yeah. When you see people struggling, because you're very observant, what are some patterns that you might see that, you notice in somebody which would cause you to like ask in a one-on-one or even approach them separately if like maybe they don't report to you, but you just notice something happening? What kind of patterns do you notice?
I mean, I think one pattern is just the life getting in the way of just your ability to be successful at work. So we're complicated beings. People have full lives outside of work. And so I think that influences. So I have picked up on when people are feeling down, or, their team's message back's a little bit shorter than it has been in the past. They are a little slower to respond to things than they have been in the past. So sometimes I find that it's that causes folks to struggle. Workload, bandwidth, resource issues, those are all things that feel sometimes to an employee outside of their control. That's something to think about, right? Like when you feel like you don't have the power to move through the challenge that is in front of you, or maybe it's not even a challenge, it's just your regular day-to-day job, that those feelings, that frustration can build and build and build. And when we don't feel like we have control or choice, I think it just exacerbates. So definitely seeing that be an issue. I think also just like someone's skill set and their abilities can get in the way. We have, if you've got a company where folks wear many hats, sometimes we've got people who are doing stretch assignments or playing in areas and roles where they're underdeveloped or under-equipped to be able to be effective. So that can create frustration. I think just the world and everything that is happening around us, not even just your personal life, but if you expand beyond that, there are pressures, and the economy, just things happening in our communities can feel overwhelming. And all of that trickles into our ability to just feel successful. And it might be all of those things too.
Yeah.
It might not just be one. So I feel like it could be a combo of any one of those.
I know that's the thing as a leader, you've got to recognize is if somebody's struggling, what is the root cause of it? Is it a confidence issue? Is it a competence issue? Are they unclear about what they need to do? Or is there an external factor? Like you mentioned, the economy, the financial struggles, emotional struggles, something that's affecting their ability to perform. How do you uncover that?
I think, having those conversations with employees to ask questions to really understand where they got stuck can help you get to that. I think working with employees and building trust helps people to feel comfortable to share. So if it's, you said, a confidence issue or a competency issue, hopefully we've got employees that have some self-awareness to know, I tried and it didn't go well and I failed and I want to talk to you about that. And we can use those as coaching moments to be able to build those skills up. You have to have a pretty self-aware person for that. You've got to have a culture of trust so that folks can feel like they can be vulnerable. If you've got an organization where admitting that you might not be equipped to accomplish the expectations of your role could mean you don't have a job anymore, people don't trust you anymore, there's negative repercussions that you might face, you're probably not going to be able to have a conversation with someone to get that out of there. So building a culture of, leaders modeling this behavior, being able to talk through and say, when I had that situation come up, here's where I got stuck. Is that relatable to you at all? Trying to pull on my own past experiences, I think, has been helpful. And it also makes people feel comfortable to be able to share these things with you so that you're, someone they can lean on, someone they can rely on. And hopefully we've got folks being proactive. So we're not at the point where the project's going to fail, the client's going to fire us, it's a 911 situation. We're catching things a little bit earlier so that you can jump in as a leader and support.
There's a couple areas I want to get your opinion on, and I think they're somewhat related. So I know there's people that just have a tendency to self-sabotage themselves, and that can look a lot of different ways. But there's this other thing too, is you mentioned past experiences, and past experiences are great to look at solving issues that have bubbled up that maybe you accomplished in the past. That experience has taught you something new that you can apply, but it also can backfire if we go in with this belief that is no longer true anymore. And that is self-sabotaging in some respects.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that? How do you uncover where somebody might be self-sabotaging because of an existing belief that may no longer be true, and they're applying it to the situation?
That's a good question. I think going back to what I said about going in with an open mind as a leader, I think is important. So if I'm going in thinking, here's what I think the problem is about, I've done this before, I know how to get us through. I'm not going in listening for what that person's perspective is. So I may be sabotaging the conversation, honestly, as a leader that we're going to have. I think people that can't get out of their own way are generally folks that are, they've got a hard time admitting where their gaps are. There's a lack of self-awareness that I think is happening for those individuals. And there's not an environment where feedback is normal. So if I'm meeting with an employee and I want to be able to dig in and try to get to the root of the problem, I've got to have somebody who's open to me asking questions, maybe calling out some things that may have gone wrong up until this point. When you can do that, I think you can help lift people out of those moments where they're just kind of given up. They're, rooted in, well, it's already as bad as it is now. There's no way I can get out of this. It's literally our job as leaders to do that. And if we aren't motivated by seeing the people around us be successful, then we have no business being in a leadership position, in my opinion.
So your job as a leader is to reduce friction, remove barriers that might be allowing an employee to be the best version of themselves, be productive, like we all want to be. But at some point, if you're coaching and the other person is just not quite making the change that they need to do, not for lack of effort, but just a lack of whatever, like competency, confident, whatever, all the things we talked about. At what point do you start having to hold them accountable, and how do you go about doing that?
I mean, I think you're holding people accountable all through the way, and maybe accountability in the beginning isn't to successfully working through that issue. Maybe accountability is being a willing participant in these conversations. Like for me, I need there to be a two-way street. If I'm going to come to you and we're going to try to work on something together, I need you to be putting in as much effort as I am. That's important. And I think there's accountability in that. I can't want this to be successful more than you. I've said that to people. I can't want you to be great at your job more than you want to be great at your job. So you've got to meet me halfway, put in the effort. We've talked before on here about performance management and all that goes into that. And at some point, sometimes we get there. But I think before you go down that road as a leader, you should be asking yourself the question, have I done everything I can to help this person be successful? Mm-hmm. Have I been clear about my expectations? Do they have the tools and resources available to them so that they can move through their work? Are there points of friction in our processes or with their peers or with our customers or our technology or tools, all of those things that make them being successful more difficult? And I've said before to employees, like, I'm not convinced that this is just you. I think that there may be challenges inside of the process, our organization, how we do the work that is prohibiting you from being successful. Let's talk about that. Let's really get in and figure out what it is that's getting in the way. And that's just happens inside of a willing conversation between two people who both want to move through that. Sometimes uncomfortable conversations, but I think necessary ones.
I had a guest on, and I'm trying to remember when it was. It was definitely a few months ago I had the interview. I'm trying to remember the episode. But he said something profound when talking about one of his employees and their career development. He was talking about how he realized like he wasn't doing his job as a leader when he cared more about the person's growth and development than they did. Yeah. And I think what he meant by that was he's putting in so much work and almost taking control of their career growth when the I think it was a woman should have probably taken more of an ownership role over her own career and then use the leader as a coach, as a tool to get the resources and the skills and the growth that she needed to do to get where she wanted to go. Do you think that's one of the biggest mistakes leaders make, is like taking too much ownership, talking too much, taking too much of a role in the decision making, all of that?
Yeah, for sure. It fuels our ego. Like it feels good to solve people's problems.
Yeah.
It does. So I think especially, I mean, even early in my career, I find myself doing it even now sometimes where it's
Yeah.
just like, ooh, I could check that box. I could get that thing done for them. I
That
could
dopamine
save the
hit.
day. Yeah, it's dopamine. So yes, I think people do that. I think it's a mistake. It's a trap. And when you can lift out, when you can have that employee take that ownership, it's like much sweeter success anyways. And when you can have yourself filled by the success of the people that report to you and from your teams versus your own individual wins, that's real leadership. And I remember when Angela Perkins said that to me, and it was when I was transitioning from being just an HR business partner here at Xenium. I had my clients, they loved me. I was pretty good at that job, transitioning to leading those people. And she said, one thing I worry about is that you're going to not feel as fulfilled. You're going to have to figure out how to feel excited about those people's NPS scores and the shout outs that those people are getting, and that your team is taking care of clients versus Lacey's book of business and what I was responsible for. And that took time. And those, you have these moments where you see someone work through something and you've given them the feedback and you've said, let's remove the barriers, put it all on the table. I always like asking, what's going to get in the way of you being successful? Or what do you need from me to meet these expectations? So you've had all that conversation, and then they do. Like, that's a dopamine hit. Like, that's where and then you have this employee who's thriving and contributing. And those are just those moments where it doesn't always happen, but you got to hang on to those ones for sure.
Yeah, I love that. So if somebody's listening and being like, oh, okay, this is striking a chord. I need to get over my ego, and I need to change my approach with my employees to make sure that they're getting what they need out of me, getting the resources they need. Like, what are some approaches or changes they can make to help?
I mean, for one, meet regularly with your people, because you can't find these issues if you're not having regular, meaningful connections. Allow employees to drive those agendas of those meetings. You may come with things you want to touch base on, but empower your employees to bring with you their challenges and what they've tried and the areas of support that they feel like they need. I'm even motivated when my manager, Angela, says to me, like, what do you have on your agenda? Like, I feel in control of that time, because the time is precious. We don't get a lot of one-on-one time. So I appreciate that. I also think, if you come in, like I said, with an answer or a preconceived notion of what you think is going to help someone be able to move through a situation where there's friction and we're not seeing success, you're going to miss an opportunity to either help them to better see the whole picture, or maybe find something within the organization that maybe also needs to be addressed. So having that open mind, I think, is really important.
Lacey, I appreciate you coming on and bantering with me. It's a lot of fun to always talk with you. You have some really good insights, and I know you're always sharing those insights, on LinkedIn. So I encourage people to go connect with you on LinkedIn. We'll put a link to your profile there so people could connect with you. Anything else you want to say about this topic? I know you're really passionate about it.
No, just leadership is hard. And I think having a community around you where you can bounce ideas is helpful. So probably the other leaders in your organization are feeling these same feelings and having these same challenges. So find a peer group, find people that you can connect with to talk about what's working and what's not. That does make a difference.
Lacey, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the guest's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Xenium HR or the host, Brandon Laws. The material